Hey, everybody. This is Matt Mayoko from NBC Sports Bay Area. Just checking in here as the 49ers have their second of five consecutive days off during their bye week. But you can rest assured that while the coaches are probably taking a little bit of a break, probably not much, they're doing a lot of self-scout right now from the first eight games of the season. The players are taking some time off, except for the guys who are going through physical therapy, coming back from injuries, trying to get back on the practice field on Monday. One player in particular, obviously Christian McCaffrey, but the day after the 49ers return and have their first kind of bonus practice to get ready for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the trading deadline on Tuesday. And so we'll talk about the trading deadline and rank where I feel the 49ers top needs are heading into this last real opportunity where they can go out and get somebody off another team's roster to help them out in the second half of the season. But first, this is brought to you by Canyon Club Brewery. It's a brewery, a beer garden, restaurant, all in a family-friendly atmosphere in Moraga, California. It's pretty darn close to where I live, so I often stop by and check things out and have a cold one and some tasty bites as well. And keep an eye out for this one. It is coming soon to the Danville Livery. If you've ever been there, you know there's a lot of great shops there. It's a great location right off of 680. So look for Canyon Club Brewery coming to the Danville Livery, and I can assure you, I will be stopping by there quite often on my way home whenever I need a refreshment going home. Okay, let's talk about the trading deadline because I've ranked what I would consider the top needs for the 49ers. Do I expect them to make a trade? I would say I almost expect them to make a trade. Whereas, if you've asked me in the past, probably not, just because, trades were never a big part of the NFL landscape at the trading deadline. There's always a lot of buildup to it, a lot of talk about it, and then nothing would ever happen. Well, in recent years, I think with kind of a new way of thinking along the NFL, there have been a lot of trades, and there have already been a lot of trades in the NFL. And one recently, Deontay Johnson going from the Panthers to the Ravens. And John Lynch on his KBR show said 49ers were not involved in that one at all. So I don't know if they've been really involved in any of these trades that have happened where some wide receivers have switched teams. But let's go through what I would consider the top draft needs. And it doesn't mean that, um, whatever my number one is, that if the 49ers make a trade, that's where they're going. So I really think that what has to kind of line up for the 49ers are a couple of things. One, they are getting some players back, or they expect to get some players back, some injured players that either didn't suit up for the last game, or guys who are on injured reserve or PUP who are coming back from injuries. And so some of those names, maybe I'll just hit them as I hit on the position groups that I rank and where I rank them. But also, it's not so easy. For instance, they could say, oh, we need a player at this position more than we need a player at that position. But the player at that position just makes more sense as far as whatever the compensation is, whatever that player's contract status is. And so I don't see them passing up an opportunity to get a good player that can help them, as long as it doesn't hamstring them for the future if a trade can be done. Whether it's the second position on their list or the fourth position or whatever the case may be, if a player can help them and they don't think that it jeopardizes their long-term viability as far as hurting the team for the future, I think they're going to make that trade. So, what I'm talking about is, in order for them to pick up a player in the draft or in the trade market, that player has to fit them in a lot of different ways. So it's not just, playing fantasy football and saying, oh, I know that name. He's putting up big numbers, or he's having success here. Let's just bring him to our team. I think it's a matter of the style, the scheme that player has, or what it fits his style of play. It's the player's ability, whether it's the position or just his mental mindset, to pick up things quickly after getting here, and it's the salary that the 49ers would inherit, as well as what it would take from a draft pick compensation part. And so one of the things I look at is just last year with the defensive line, 49ers at the trade deadline added, I think before the trade deadline, they added Randy Gregory. And then right at the trade deadline, they bring in Chase Young. And then later, after the Chargers released Sebastian Joseph Day, the 49ers signed him as well. And those guys really didn't make a contribution. I think all three of them were active in the Super Bowl, and I think Young had a pretty good game in the Super Bowl. But it just seemed like it wasn't a smooth transition as far as those guys coming in and picking things up and hitting the ground running. Maybe um, we'll see how that turns out this year as far as where the 49ers go. But not to give it away, I will be coming back and talking about the 49ers defensive line. Okay, so like I said, the 49ers have been active in the trade market in recent years. And actually, it's really started with the arrival of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, that very first year, 2017. Yeah. Um, the 49ers had approached the previous free agency, their first free agency, and they signed Brian Hoyer and I think Matt Barkley as quarterbacks with the eye on signing Kirk Cousins and going all in to sign Kirk Cousins as a free agent the following off season. Well, then Jimmy Garoppolo falls in their lap and they decide, well, let's do this instead. And, famously, John Lynch said that Kyle Shanahan was in a state of mourning for a while because he knew that, once they acquired Jimmy Garoppolo and signed him to a contract extension, that Kirk Cousins was off the table. So since Garoppolo, it was Emmanuel Sanders who gave them a nice boost down the stretch run of the 2019 season. Charles Omenihu ended up being a good player for the 49ers that they received for not much in way of a trade with Houston. And then, of course, Christian McCaffrey, Randy Gregory, Chase Young. Mentioned those guys. Okay, so let's start off with where the 49ers are not playing well. And defensively, I would say, just looking at PFF, I'm referencing PFF because of their grades. I realize it's not perfect. I realize that there are a lot of holes in their grading system, but generally speaking, the guys who are graded the lowest are not playing as well as the guys who are graded the highest. I think that's fair to say. There could be some nitpicking on, how this guy was graded or this guy was graded on a certain play, but let's just stick with that as just kind of a very rough barometer on how these guys are performing. So the 49ers lowest rated defensive player, a guy who plays a lot of snaps, is Devondre Campbell, followed by Leonard Floyd. Now, when I look at the defense, I would say that those are not only the top two areas of need for the 49ers on defense, but I would say the top two areas of need for the 49ers as a team. And so defensive line, they can use some more depth there. They will be getting Yetur Gross-Matos back at some point. They're hoping pretty soon after the bye, if not on Monday. They could open up that window for him. And then also Kevin Givens, who sat out the last game with a core muscle situation going on, he should be back too. So does that offset what the 49ers have there? What the 49ers would have to determine is, if they go out and get somebody, are they bringing enough to the table that those new players coming in would give you more production than an ascending Evan Anderson as a defensive tackle and an ascending Sam Okawanu as a defensive end in base situations, and then an inside pass rusher. So, that's where the 49ers would have to kind of make their decision. But defensive line would be the number one area of need. Another thing I like about defensive line, adding to the defensive line mix, is because these guys will play. An offensive line Basically, it's five guys, and that's it, unless there's an injury. Other positions, linebacker to a degree, defensive backfield. It's five players coming in, a fifth coming in nickel situations. But with the defensive line, you're rotating guys constantly in. So some of the names, one name I didn't mention a couple of videos ago was Calais Campbell from Miami, but Arden Key from Tennessee, Zadarius Smith from Cleveland. I did mention Chase Young, bringing him back. Probably not, but I thought I'd just throw his name in there. Um, who else? Aziz Ojulari from the Giants, kind of a different kind of guy, not on his second contract, still on his first contract. I'm sure the Giants will want to keep him and keep him around, sign him to a long-term extension. And then DJ Jones from Denver. The reason I don't think that'll happen with Denver and DJ Jones is because Denver's still in the mix. They're above 500. They're pushing for a playoff spot. And so when I look at it, some of the teams that I think could be in play for the 49ers would certainly be the Tennessee Titans because, they know Rand Carthon, the general manager. There's an open line of communication there. And then Miami with Mike McDaniel, head coach there, and then the Jets with their season kind of falling apart. And so I would say, potentially root against the Jets on Thursday night because the more they fall out of it, the more they might be sellers, and the more they're sellers, they might have an opening to make a deal with the 49ers. Houston is another team that the 49ers could make a deal with. However, Houston is very much in the thick of the playoff race, and I don't expect them to be selling off any of their players. So yeah, Tennessee is a spot. And the first name that came to mind was like Aziz Al-Shire, getting him from Tennessee. I don't think that's happening because he is signed. He has a pretty hefty contract for next year. I don't expect the 49ers to really want to add somebody who has much money on his deal in future years. And we'll see how Dre Greenlaw comes back. But the thinking is, I think the 49ers are fine if Dre Greenlaw comes back soon and he's the same player that he was when we last saw him. But things get kind of tenuous and kind of iffy if he isn't the same player and he doesn't step back in or he has a setback, and then they'd have to go with Devondre Campbell for the rest of the season. And he has certainly been up and down. I think he had a good game by and large against the Cowboys, but late in the game when the 49ers gave up a very quick scoring drive, I noticed Devondre Campbell jumped some underneath routes and left some openings behind him that contributed to some big plays. So the number one and number two positions of need on my list are defensive line and linebacker. I think they're fine at cornerback. I think they're fine at safety with Talanoa Hufanga coming back. I know there's been some talk, and I kind of agree with it that the 49ers have, similar safeties. They're all kind of not necessarily box safeties. All these guys do make plays. They do get their hands on the football. They make some interceptions. They're not good. Their forte is not one-on-one pass coverage. Hufanga coming to, the lineup coming back with Malik Mustafa there and Jair Brown. I think it's going to be really difficult for the 49ers to make a change at safety and get Malik Mustafa off the field when Talanoa Hufanga has not played much football in the past year coming off the ACL. And then he's also scheduled for unrestricted free agency in the offseason. So that's a look at the defense. Now let's look at the 49ers offense. I think probably the consensus is they would need help at wide receiver. And I would agree with that. From the standpoint of that being my third draft need or trade need for the 49ers, but they do have some promise there. So I don't know if it's a dire situation because Juwan Jennings is expected back on the practice field on Monday. Missing him for the past few weeks has been a big blow, I think, to that offense. So getting him back just pushes everybody down one rung on the ladder. It means that Ricky Pearsall doesn't have to play every snap. It means that they can kind of spot him. He can play 25 to 30 snaps a game, perhaps, and play him at a spot where they can kind of best utilize his skills. And so I don't see wide receiver as being a big, a big need for the 49ers. I don't think they're going to go out and get a starting wide receiver because of how difficult that spot is. Learning the route tree, learning how the 49ers do it. It's going to take a certain kind of guy. The guy's going to have to buy into blocking everything else. So I don't see necessarily the 49ers adding a piece there because they do have Debo Samuel. They do have Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. And Chris Conley's going to be active for every game because of his special teams. Jacob Cowing's going to be active for every game because of his ability to field punts. And I will say that that game that he played against Kansas City when he went in right after Brandon Ayuk's injury, I thought he showed some stuff, and it wasn't necessarily the 41-yard catch down the field that kind of opened my eyes. It was more him taking that short pass, the bubble screen or whatever that was, and just darting up the field near the goal line for a 9-yard gain. So he showed a lot. Maybe he gets more playing time as this season goes on. The 49ers also have Ronnie Bell, sorry. Okay. The other spot, um, how about special teams? And I can't give you any names of guys who would be available, but maybe a special teams ace, a guy who can help the team in coverage, not a kicker because Jake Moody will be coming back very soon, but maybe that's where they look. A guy who is kind of a dynamo on special teams who can run down, a leader type, a guy who can stay in his lane and do all the things that 49ers are looking for to bring a boost to special teams. Both Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch talked this week about how they were encouraged by what they saw in special teams against Dallas. So that would be an area, I guess. I would also say tight end, just because they have one of the best tight ends in the league in George Kittle. And then after that, it's kind of niche guys, like Eric Saubert and Jake Tongus and Braden Willis. So, if George Kittle ever had to leave the lineup, maybe it just changes how they handle things offensively. But I don't know if there's anybody out there that they would bring back. The two guys who left for the Falcons with Charlie Werner and Ross Dwelly, I don't think the Falcons are going to be selling at all. So that would be a spot, I suppose. And I know a lot of people think offensive line. I just don't think that would be an area where they would need. I don't think there's anybody out there that they could bring in who would be a starter just because of how difficult it would be for a player to come in mid-season and pick up this system and be a starter. And I don't think there are any glaring weaknesses on the offensive line. I think the 49ers have the number 2 ranked offense in the league for a reason. They're fourth in passing yards, they're fourth in rushing yards, and so I think the offensive line has played pretty well. And then as far as the depth at that position goes, John Feliciano will be coming back. I would guess that again, looking at the PFF rankings, Jake Brendel, the center, is the lowest rated of the 49ers regulars. Actually, kind of surprisingly, Kyle Juszczyk is down there too, but I don't think 49ers have any issues with Kyle Juszczyk and how he's playing. But Jake Brendel would be, I guess, the lowest rated 49ers starter, but I don't see them going out and getting a center, especially all the things that a center has to do in this offense. So, and when you look at the 49ers backup offensive line, Jalen Moore is their swing tackle backup. Nick Zakel, inside guy. Burford, of course, was a starter for a lot of last season at right guard. Really, when you look at it, and I said Feliciano coming back, who has center guard flexibility. When you look at it, the big piece, the huge acquisition for the 49ers offensive line that just kind of brought that whole group together was taking Dominic Pooney in the 3rd round of that draft. And I know initially people are like, why are they taking a wide receiver in the 1st round? Well, it probably worked out well for the 49ers that they did, or at least that they didn't address offensive line at that spot, because I don't think they could have taken an offensive lineman in the 1st round of the draft that could be any better or would be any better than the offensive line they took in the 3rd round, Dominic Pooney. And so I think the 49ers are pretty set at offensive line just because of how difficult it would be to bring somebody in. And then, of course, they're not going to add a quarterback, and I don't think they have any need at running back with Christian McCaffrey coming back and being added to the mix with Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerendo and Patrick Taylor. In fact, think of it this way. If as the 49ers hope, McCaffrey is back on the field Monday, he's looking good, they have him active for the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mason, Guerendo might just completely fall off the depth chart as far as what the 49ers will be looking for from that position. Do they keep four running backs active? Because Taylor's out there a lot for his duty on special teams. All right, so that's a quick look at where the 49ers draft needs are, ranking them. Defensive line number one, linebacker number two, although Greenlaw's coming back. Number three would be wide receiver, four special teams, and I guess five tight end. Tell me what you think. And also, if you watched my previous video where I talk about just kind of building rapport with guys and how I approach my job, if there are any other topics like that you'd like me to address, leave it in the comments section. I'll take a look at it. Once again, thank you for watching this. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a comment and a like. And that's it for now.